April 20th, 1992. Wembley Stadium, center stage. 9:15 p.m. 72,000 people were watching George Michael. 1 billion people were following the live broadcast on television. George brought the microphone to his mouth. Tonight we celebrate Freddie Mercury, a man who changed music, who changed lives. Backstage, Elton John, David Bowie, and Brian May were watching. They all knew. George wanted to say something. George continued, "And I want to talk about courage." He took a breath. The spotlight hit his face. "Because Freddie taught us that love is love." And he stopped. The producer shouted through the headset, "George, sing, just sing." But George wanted to speak. He wanted to keep the promise he'd made to Freddie. And the truth is, he stopped. His hands were trembling. The crowd fell silent. And then George began singing, without saying anything, only with tears. That moment became one of pop music's greatest what-ifs. But nobody knew why George Michael couldn't speak, and nobody knew what Freddie Mercury had told him. But wait, this story doesn't start on that stage. It starts 5 months earlier, on Freddie's deathbed. November 24th, 1991. Freddie Mercury's house in London. Garden Lodge, Kensington, 6:45 a.m. Freddie Mercury was living his final hours. He was 45 years old, but looked like a 70-year-old man. AIDS complications had destroyed his body. Only a few people were in the room. Jim Hutton, his partner of 7 years. The man introduced to the world only as a friend. Mary Austin, Freddie's former fiancée. His closest friend. Dave Clark, an old friend who worked in theater. Freddie's personal assistant. Freddie lay in bed, struggling to breathe. Jim held his hand. Freddie opened his eyes, looked at Jim. "Jim, I need to say something." Jim leaned in. "Quiet, darling. Save your energy." But Freddie insisted. "No, I must say it now. Tomorrow will be too late." Freddie's voice was barely above a whisper. "Call George Michael, please. Tell him." Jim was surprised. "George Michael? Why?" Freddie tried to breathe. "Because he's like me. Hiding. I see it in his eyes. The same fear. The same loneliness. Jim, you stayed hidden for 7 years. 7 years the world didn't know us. They only said friend. And now I'm dying, and you'll be alone. Nobody will see you as a partner. Nobody will understand your pain." Jim's eyes filled with tears. "Freddie, please." But Freddie continued. "Tell George, the closet kills us, slowly kills us. I hid for 40 years. Only in the last year could I openly call you my partner. It was too late. George is still young, 28 years old. Tell him not to wait, because time never forgives." Freddie's voice cut off. He couldn't breathe. Jim was crying. "I'll tell him, I promise." Freddie tried to smile. "Good, because George deserves a better ending than me." 6:48 p.m. Freddie Mercury took his last breath. Jim Hutton held his lover's hand. Mary Austin kissed Freddie's forehead. Dave Clark cried silently. The world had lost one of its stars, but the official announcement wouldn't be made for 24 hours, because family and close circle had to fulfill Freddie's will, a private, media-free, respectful goodbye. That night, Jim Hutton sat alone, beside Freddie's bed. He thought about Freddie's last words. Call George Michael. But how would he call him? He didn't even have George's number. Then it occurred to him. Mary Austin knew. Freddie and George met occasionally, secretly. Mary organized it. Jim went to Mary. "Mary, can you give me George Michael's number?" Freddie wanted me to speak with him. Mary was surprised. "Freddie talked about George?" Jim nodded. It was one of his last words. November 25th, 1991. 90 away. Jim Hutton called George Michael. The phone rang. George was sleeping. He'd been in the studio until late the night before. He answered the phone. "Hello?" Jim's voice was trembling. "George? This is Jim Hutton, Freddie Mercury's." George sat up. "Jim, I know you. Freddie talked about you so much. How are you?" Jim fell silent. Then he spoke. George, Freddie died yesterday. George's world spun. What? No, no, that's impossible. I spoke with him last month. He said he was getting better. Jim started crying. He lied. George, he wanted to seem strong to you, but in the last month he deteriorated very quickly. And yesterday morning, he was gone. George collapsed to the floor with the phone. God, Jim, I'm so sorry. So sorry. How are you? Jim tried to collect his voice. I'm not okay, but actually, that's why I'm calling. Freddie wanted me to speak with you in his final hours. George was surprised. With me? Why? Jim took a deep breath. Because Freddie was worried about you. George didn't understand. Worried? Why? Jim continued. George, Freddie knew about you. That you're in the closet. That you're hiding. Because he lived that way for 40 years. And one of his last words was, tell George, the closet kills us. Tell him not to wait. Because time doesn't forgive. George, Freddie saw himself in you, his younger self, and he was afraid you'd make the same mistake. George's breath caught. He started crying. Because Freddie was right. George was hiding too, lying every day, wearing masks every day. Jim, I don't know what to say. Jim spoke. Don't say anything. Just think. Think about Freddie's message. Because he didn't want to die with you. He wanted to live with you. By coming out. By being free. George hung up the phone and cried for hours. Freddie Mercury was dead, and his last words had left George a legacy, courage. But could George find that courage? The following days were a nightmare. On the afternoon of November 25th, Freddie's death was officially announced. CNN, BBC, MTV, every channel carried the same news. Freddie Mercury dies of AIDS complications at age 45. The world was in shock. Millions cried, but the media's focus quickly shifted elsewhere. Freddie Mercury's secret gay life. Who is Jim Hutton? What will happen to Queen? George Michael watched television at home. Every report described Freddie as a secret gay icon. Every headline was stigmatizing, and George was afraid. If I come out too, they'll write the same things about me. My career will end. My fans will leave. I'll ruin my family. But then he remembered Freddie's words. The closet kills us. December 1991. Brian May called George Michael. George, we want to organize a memorial concert for Freddie. Wembley Stadium. April 1992. Will you sing? George hesitated. I don't know, Brian. Freddie's loss is so fresh. Brian insisted. I know, but Freddie loved you so much. He'd smile when he heard your voice. Please, George, do it for him. George accepted. Okay, but which song do you want me to sing? Brian thought. Somebody to Love. It was Freddie's favorite, and your voice is perfect for it. George agreed, but as he hung up the phone, he thought, this isn't just a concert. This is an opportunity. 72,000 people. 1 billion viewers. I can keep my promise to Freddie. I can tell the world the truth. But could he? There were 5 months until that day came, and every day George grew more afraid. January-March 1992. It was hell for George Michael. The media was exploiting Freddie's death. The tabloids were harassing Jim Hutton. Headlines everywhere. Who is Freddie Mercury's secret boyfriend? George watched and was horrified. Jim, a man who had lived with Freddie for 7 years, who loved him until his last breath, was now being harassed by the media. Secret boyfriend, scandalous relationship, AIDS victim. Not one headline called Jim a partner. Not one report honored their love with respect. George thought, if I come out too, it'll be like this for me. The media will exploit me, harass me, stigmatize me. And the fear grew. In late March 1992, George was writing songs in the studio. He sat at the piano. A melody came. Melancholic, painful, beautiful. He started writing lyrics, but couldn't finish them. Because the song was about a loss, a secret loss. A loss he couldn't tell the world about. Jesus to a child was born that day. But George wouldn't release it, not yet, because the lyrics were too personal, too revealing. April 19th, 1992. Wembley Stadium, rehearsal day. 3 p.m. George Michael stood alone in the empty stadium. The concert was tomorrow. He was rehearsing Somebody to Love. Queen's musicians were there. Brian May on guitar, Roger Taylor on drums, John Deacon on bass. George sang the song. His voice was powerful, emotional, perfect. When the rehearsal ended, Brian applauded. Brilliant, George. Freddie would be proud. George smiled but felt conflicted inside, because tomorrow, on that stage, he wanted to do something, say something. But could he gather the courage? After rehearsal ended, George stayed alone in the empty stadium. He sat at the piano, placed his hands on the keys, and started crying. "Freddie," he said aloud, "tomorrow I'm going to do something for you. I promise. I'll use your courage. I'll tell the world the truth. I won't make your mistake." But silence. Only empty stadium echoes. And George knew deep down, I won't be able to. The fear is too strong. I'm not as brave as Freddie. April 20th, 1992. Wembley Stadium. Concert day. 10 a.m. The phone rang in George Michael's dressing room. Jim Hutton was calling. "George, today is Freddie's concert. How are you feeling?" George took a deep breath. "I'm scared, Jim. Very scared." Jim understood. "George, I know what you're going to do. You're thinking about coming out today, aren't you?" George was surprised. "How did you know?" Jim smiled, a bitter smile. "Because I remember Freddie's last words, and I hear the determination in your eyes. George, if you're going to do it today, I want you to know, Freddie will be with you, on that stage with you, and he'll be proud. Whatever you decide, he'll be proud." George started crying. "Jim, what if I fail? What if fear wins?" Jim was silent. Then he spoke. "Then Freddie's fear becomes real, and you'll live like him, hidden, alone, full of regrets. But George, you still have time. Time that Freddie didn't have. Use it." 2:00 p.m. George Michael found Elton John in the dressing room. "Elton, can I talk to you?" Elton sat down. "Of course, George. What's wrong?" George sat, his hands trembling. "Today, when I go on stage, I want to say something. I want to tell the truth, who I am." Elton understood. "George, are you thinking about coming out? Today? In front of 72,000 people?" George nodded. "Freddie did this concert for me. In his last words, he talked about me. Told me not to wait." "Elton, how did you do it? How did you come out?" Elton took a deep breath. "George, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't easy. When I came out in 1988, I risked losing everything. But you know what happened? I didn't lose anything. On the contrary, I found myself. I became free, and I was happy with David." George listened. "But you were already successful. You'd already sold millions. My career is at its peak right now. The Faith album, the Grammys. If I come out, I'll lose everything." Elton held George's hand. "George, listen to me. Fear will always be there. But regret is worse. I hid for 20 years. I lied for 20 years. And I hated myself every day. You're 28 years old now. If you do it today, you'll live free until you're 40. But if you wait, you'll still be hiding at 40, like Freddie. And then it'll be too late." George cried. But can I do it? When I go on stage, when the spotlight hits my face, when millions are watching, will the words come out?" Elton smiled. "Just think of Freddie. He'll be with you. And remember, you're not alone. I'm there too. David Bowie is there. Brian May is there. We all have your back." George nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it today." But deep down, hesitation remained, because the fear was so powerful. "Hold up. You haven't seen what really happened backstage that night." 8. Backstage. George Michael's dressing room. George was looking at himself in the mirror. The makeup artist was applying powder, but George's hand was trembling. David Bowie entered. "George, you're on in 15 minutes." George turned. "David, I might not be able to." Bowie approached. "George, Freddie will be proud of you, whatever you do." George asked. "David, did you ever think about coming out?" Bowie smiled. A strange smile. "George, I always preferred ambiguity." Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, they were all masks. But Freddie was different. He tried to live without masks in his final year, and it was too late. You're younger. You can still choose. George nodded. The door opened. The producer appeared. George, are you ready? George stood up. Yes, I'm ready. 8:28 p.m. In the corridor, George Michael leaned against the wall. He couldn't breathe. Panic attack. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking. He was sweating. Elton John found him. George, breathe. Just breathe. George looked at him, eyes full of panic. Elton, I can't. I'm too scared. Elton held his shoulders. George, look at me. You don't have to. Nobody's forcing you. Just go on stage, sing your song, and it's over. George nodded. But Freddie, I promised him. Elton spoke gently. Freddie will understand. He never forced you. He only warned you. The decision is yours. George took a deep breath. Okay, I'll just sing. I won't do anything else. But as he walked toward the stage, the internal conflict continued. Freddie, forgive me. I'm not ready. Not yet. 9:15 p.m. George Michael walked onto the stage. 72,000 people were standing, applauding. The spotlights were blinding. Brian May on guitar, Roger Taylor on drums, John Deacon on bass. George took the microphone. His hands were trembling, but the sound system was so powerful that nobody noticed. Good evening, Wembley, he shouted. The crowd went wild. Tonight, we're here to celebrate Freddie Mercury, a man who changed music, who changed lives, and who had the courage to be himself. George stopped. He took a breath. The spotlight hit his face. Cameras zoomed in for close-ups. Millions were watching. Backstage, Elton John, David Bowie, Jim Hutton were watching. They all knew George wanted to say something. George continued. And I want to talk about courage. He took a breath. His heart was racing. I want to talk about being true to who you are. The crowd fell silent. Everyone was listening carefully. Because Freddie taught us that love is love. And George stopped. The producer shouted through the headset. George, no, sing, just sing. George wanted to continue. And the truth is, he stopped. His hands were trembling. His mouth was dry. The words were stuck in his throat. Backstage, Jim Hutton whispered, Come on, George, you can do it. Freddie is with you. But George was frozen. Everything came to mind. The headlines the media wrote about Freddie, Jim Hutton being harassed, his career ending, his family being ruined, his fans disappearing. Fear, fear, fear. And then, George began singing. The first notes of Somebody to Love came out, without saying anything, just singing. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. The crowd thought it was for Freddie. They started applauding, but the truth was different. George was crying because he had failed. He couldn't keep his promise to Freddie. He couldn't reveal himself. He was a coward. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. George left the stage, ran to the dressing room, went into the bathroom, collapsed on the floor, and sobbed. He covered his face with his hands. Freddie, forgive me. I couldn't do it. My cowardice won. I let you down. The door opened. Elton John came in. George, are you okay? George raised his head, his eyes blood red. No, Elton, I'm not okay. I failed. Freddie trusted me, and I failed. Elton crouched beside him. George, don't beat yourself up. It was too hard. Maybe not today, but one day. George shook his head. One day. When, Elton? 10 years from now. Freddie was right. Time doesn't forgive. And I wasted time. Elton hugged him. George, you still have time. You couldn't do it today, but you can tomorrow. At the next interview. At the next concert. At the next opportunity. But George knew deep down, the next opportunity wouldn't come for a very long time. Post-concert press conference. 11:30 p.m. Journalists were firing questions at George Michael. George, you were crying during your performance. What did Freddie mean to you? George sat at the microphone, tired, exhausted. Freddie was a hero to me. A musical genius. An icon. And today I tried to honor him. A journalist asked. You seemed like you wanted to say something before the performance. Why did you start singing? George paused. He knew this question would come. It was just an emotional moment. I was thinking about Freddie, his legacy, and I couldn't find the words. So I decided to sing. Because music is more powerful than words. But it was a lie. And George knew it. The press conference ended. George returned to his hotel, alone. He sat and wrote in his journal, April 20th, 1992. Today I had the chance to keep my promise to Freddie. 72,000 people, 1 billion viewers. I could have told the truth, but I froze. My cowardice won. Freddie, forgive me. I let you down, and I will never forgive myself. April 25th, 1992. Jim Hutton's house in London. 10 a.m., George Michael knocked on the door. Jim opened it. George, come in. They made tea. They sat. George spoke. Jim, I wanted to thank you. I felt Freddie at the concert, in every note. Jim smiled. George, your performance was wonderful. Freddie was proud, I'm sure. George lowered his head. No, Jim, he wasn't proud. Because I failed. When I went on stage, I was going to speak. I was going to tell the world the truth. But I was afraid. And I sang, without saying anything. Jim understood. George, Freddie didn't force you to come out. He only warned you, about time. But the decision was yours. And it still is. George cried. But Jim, how do you feel? You loved Freddie for 7 years, and now the world only knows you as friends. Doesn't that hurt? Jim took a deep breath. It hurts every day, George. Every day. The media calls me the secret boyfriend. Not partner, not spouse, just friend, or secret, and it's disrespectful to Freddie's memory. But you know what I can do? Nothing, because Freddie left coming out too late, and now I'm his silent legacy. George held his hand. Jim, you are Freddie's greatest legacy. The man who loved him, cared for him, stood by him until his last breath. And one day the world will understand that, I promise. Jim smiled. George, if that day comes, it will start with you. If you come out, my story will be heard. Freddie's story will be heard. But if you don't come out, we'll all stay in the shadows. George nodded. I know. And one day I'll do it. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But one day I'll find the courage. Jim spoke gently. I hope it's not too late, George. Because Freddie was right. Time doesn't forgive. George left. But Jim's words echoed in his head. Time doesn't forgive. And George was afraid inside. What if it's too late? 1992, 1998. George Michael continued hiding for 6 years. The Sony lawsuit, inability to release albums, career stalling, everything made him retreat further. In 1996, he released Jesus to a Child, the song he wrote after Freddie, but whose lyrics he never explained. Someone I lost. Someone very special, he said in interviews. But he never said he, never gave a name. The secrecy continued. April 7th, 1998. Beverly Hills. Will Rogers Memorial Park. George Michael was arrested in a restroom. CNN breaking news. George Michael arrested for lewd conduct. This time, there was no escape. This time, everyone was finding out. George Michael was gay. But what a coming out in crime, scandal, shame. Exactly the way Freddie feared. George made a press statement. Yes, I'm gay, I've known for years. But I was afraid. Journalists asked, why didn't you come out earlier? George replied, because I was a coward. Freddie Mercury warned me. In 1992, told me not to wait. But I waited. And now my coming out is a scandal. Freddie was right. Time doesn't forgive. 2010. Jim Hutton died. Lung cancer. He was 61 years old. 19 years after Freddie. Few people attended his funeral. The media didn't care, because Jim was still known as Freddie Mercury's former friend, not as partner. George Michael went to his funeral. He stood by Jim's coffin. Jim, I promised you that the world would know you, but I failed. Just like I failed Freddie. Forgive me. George laid flowers and left. But Jim's words were still in his head. If you come out, my story will be heard. Freddie's story will be heard. George had come out in 1998, but too late. Jim was dead. Freddie was dead. And George was still living with regrets. December 25th, 2016. George Michael died. Age 53. Heart failure. Christmas Day. When the official announcement was made, the world was shocked. George Michael dies on Christmas Day! Millions cried, but the media's focus quickly shifted. Did George Michael have an AIDS connection? George Michael's secret life? Just like Freddie? Just like Jim? The stigmatization continued. At his funeral, his friends were there. Elton John, David Furnish, former bandmates. Elton gave a speech. George never forgot what Freddie told him. The closet kills us. And he was right. George came out in 1998, but it was too late. He lost 6 years. And those 6 years never left him. Regret killed him, just like Freddie. Elton cried, because he'd lost 2 friends, Freddie and George, both the same way, coming out too late, living full of regrets. In George Michael's house, a page was found in his journal. April 20, 1992. Today I couldn't keep my promise to Freddie. I froze in front of 72,000 people. Fear won. And now I know, Freddie was right. The closet kills us. Slowly, quietly, but certainly kills us. I'm dying too. A little more every day. Because my true self is in the shadows, and nothing that lives in shadows can survive for long. George Michael carried the weight of those words for 24 years. When he came out in 1998, in Beverly Hills, in Scandal, the way Freddie feared, and then he lived 18 more years, but not free, full of regrets. Freddie Mercury left George a message. Tell him not to wait, because time doesn't forgive. George waited, and time didn't forgive him. Freddie Mercury, Jim Hutton, George Michael, 3 men, 1 story. Living in the closet, secret loves, late coming outs, regrets. Freddie hid for 40 years, came out in his last year. Jim lived as a secret partner for 7 years, was never recognized. George hid until age 28, came out at 35 in Scandal. All 3 learned the same thing. Time doesn't forgive, the closet kills. And if courage comes too late, regret stays forever. Some people die too early. Some live too late. Freddie, Jim, George, they all experienced both, and the world remembers them now as icons, as legends. But the truth is, they were just people. People who feared, loved, suffered, and their story is a warning. Love needs light to survive. Courage cannot wait forever. Time forgives no one.